Chapter 12. I glanced down at my phone, 5:10 p.m., and no sign of Marcos. I tapped my foot on the floor with the sudden revelation. I didn't even know what airline he was flying with. Damn it. I looked at the clock on the wall, watching the passengers stream by me, 5:25 p.m. Is it possible that I missed him? Oh God, don't tell me I've missed him. Not on my first day of the job. My body became infested with that horrendous dread again. And just as I was about to call April, I noticed a sleek, unmarked Gulfstream roll along the tarmac toward the gate. My heart began to race. Jesus. Don't tell me. I had no idea what to expect, but I certainly wasn't expecting a gleaming Gulfstream G650 pull up just a couple of 100 yards in front of me. It slowly drew closer to the gate and then finally stopped. The door of the jet immediately fell open, and out came Marcos, with his dark hair fluttering within the strong winds, more dashing than ever. The silk suit, those buttons on his black shirt casually undone, revealing that tan chest. God, he was gorgeous. My heart skipped a beat. I felt my legs begin to crumble beneath me, trying to remain as composed as possible, watching him carry his briefcase while being followed by several other men walking along the tarmac toward me. Bonnie, do not fuck this up. Marcus had not yet spotted me, which gave me a quick moment to gather my wits. Talking with the pilot who walked alongside him, I watched him nodding. He eventually turned and shook the pilot's hand and then continued walking. Then he spotted me. Oh no. I watched a smile form across his lips, exposing those stunning dimples, flashing me a perfect set of white teeth. I can't. Please, I need to drive us home. I was crying inside. The door burst open and a gush of cool air greedily sucked inside. Good evening, Bonnie. Marcos grinned, melting me with his sensually deep voice and glancing at me with those haunting dark eyes. Welcome back to Santa Barbara. Is he being sarcastic right now? Hello, Marcos, I smiled, quickly shying away from his disarming face. My heart violently erupted within my chest, setting my cheeks on fire. Are you ready for a driving test? He asked. I'm nervous, I gasped, glancing down at my feet, forcing myself not to look at him. Haha, don't be. He interjected with a laugh, searching from my eyes. He put a soft, gentle hand on my wrist. Oh, don't touch me. Please, I will crash. It's not really a test, he muttered coolly. I just wanted you to drive me. I finally glanced up into those deep, dark eyes, observing my sweating face. Drive you? Honey, I will drive you all right. I promised myself I wouldn't read too much into his words. I'll go slow, I replied, feeling a silly, nervous laugh leave my mouth. Slow is always the best way, he said, gazing surreptitiously into my face. Shocked, I quickly turned my head away. Bonnie, you're reading way too much into this. Get a damn grip. The car's just out front, I pointed, dodging the crowd of people. Good, Marcos muttered, flinging off his black suit jacket. I'm exhausted. Marcos pulled the exit door open for me. After you. Such a gentleman. After being stopped by a couple of business-looking men that exchanged handshakes with Marcos, I climbed into the car and watched Marcos being tailed by a couple of men that got off the jet with him. He opened the back door, threw his briefcase and jacket on the seat, and then piled in the front beside me. Do those men need a ride? I questioned, watching one go into the car park, while the other stood beside the range. Marcos snickered to himself. No, they'll travel behind. They're fine. Of course. Bodyguards. Could I be any slower? Turning the key, I accidentally revved the engine. Oh, fucking Jesus. I did not just do that. I threw my hands up into my blushing face. I just wanted someone to hit me out of existence. Marcos glared at me, appearing highly tickled. Do you know what you're doing? Dude, give me a break. I am dying right now. I hope so. I burst into laughter. I hope so too, he laughed at me. Just let me tighten my seatbelt. God, how embarrassing. He turned on the stereo and some soft, relaxing music began to fill the car, quickly drowning out the rest of the world and the terrible peak hour traffic clamoring along the 101. It was a bumper to bumper. So, how's your day been? He sighed, resting back on his seat with his arm against the window and one on the glove box. I tried not to glance down at his lovely, smooth hand just an inch or so away from my arm. I also tried my best to avoid looking at his strapping, muscular thighs pulling on the silk fabric of his black trousers. It was hard, really hard. That tan skin, those bulging veins. It was fine, I answered, holding onto the steering wheel tightly, weaving in and out of the slow-moving traffic. I collected Henry from school, and then I picked up a prescription for April. I turned to look at that gorgeous face. April's been great with me. Yeah, she's a great woman, Marcos said, peering out the window, gazing into the befalling darkness. Silence. Marcos hardly looked awkward. In fact, despite his big name and big wealth, he would have to be one of the most laid-back guys I've ever come across. Nothing fazed him, and my initial gut-wrenching nerves had all but completely diminished. Say something, Bonnie. How was New York? Suddenly his cell phone rang. Hello, darling, he smiled, glancing into the traffic in front of us. April. Yes, fine. I am. Uh-huh. All right. Good. Bye, dear. He closed the phone and turned to me, sighing deeply. That was April. I was just telling her how reckless your driving is. I burst out laughing. You did? I glared at him. He gave me a mocking face. Oh my God, please just shut up now, Bonnie. I quickly learned that Marcos Almeida had a sense of humor. I liked it. New York was fine, he finally answered. Hectic, busy, stressful, the usual. I'm glad to be back. Well, so am I. The traffic had us slowed down to a crawl. Traffic's not getting any better, I mumbled. It never does, he sighed. That's why I have a helicopter at the house. Well, you could have easily had that take you home, Marcos. So tell me about you, Bonnie, he murmured, examining me, his face lit up by the buttons along the dash. Oh my God, here we go. I have a pretty simple life, I began quietly. Do you have many friends in LA? Yeah, I have some nice friends. He replied, calculating his thoughts. Will you be going back there much at all? I don't think so. I shook my head. It's really nice up here. So, no commitments in LA? He questioned inquisitively. What are you getting at, Marcos? Boyfriend? No, I answered flatly. I need a break from LA. Probably better anyway, Marcus advised. This job can be demanding at times. He turned to me. I hope you're okay with that. I glanced at him. I am totally fine with that. He smiled thoughtfully. So, your name, Bunny, is that short for something? What is this? Almeida interrogation? Actually, yes, I slightly smirked. My birth name is Bonet. Bonet, he repeated, slowly, letting it roll from his tongue. Like Monet. He appeared pleasantly surprised. Nice name. Thank you. Suddenly his phone rang again. Hey Lucas. Yes, all signed. I'll debrief you tomorrow. Thanks. Good night. Sighing sharply, he switched off the ringer and threw his cell phone on the dash. Everybody wants your time by the sounds of it. I could feel Marcus's eyes exploring me carefully. Everyone, Bonnet. I immediately felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as I shifted my clammy hands on the wheel. Marcus was doing things to me. No one, except for my parents, called me Bonnet. I stared straight ahead. I didn't want to rear the ass of the car in front of me. So, the simple life, he murmured philosophically. You like the simple life? I turned to see that he was gazing straight back at me, calmly pressed up against the window, killing me with those dark, evocative eyes. Yes, I like the simple life, I said, turning away from his steadfast glance. Don't you? Silence. I wish for it, he sighed. It must be hard for you. More silence. Had I offended him? Sometimes, he finally answered on a forceful, exhaling breath. Yes, he was clearly tired. Eventually, we turned off onto Hot Springs Road and sped up the mountain. We sat in silence for the rest of the drive home, listening to the quiet music. And oddly, I was relaxed. I couldn't believe it. The silence we shared between us didn't even bother me. And neither of us felt the desire to make small talk. Marcos Almeida was seriously relaxing. He was the ultimate king of cool. We reached the end of the dark road, peering at the security box that slowly came into view. A tall, slender man walked out from the box and gave the car a wave. No hurry, I mumbled as the gates automatically burst open. Even Happy Harry needs a break, Marcus said quietly. I snickered under my breath. I could sit in the car with this man for the rest of the night. We rolled up the drive and parked the car next to my pile of scrap metal. Bonnie, Marcus gasped in a low, sharp voice as the lights of the range fell over my car. Tell me that's not your car. My cheeks began burning through the darkness. Yes, I bit my lip with embarrassment. It's mine. Fuck, he muttered under his breath, staring in disbelief. He reached over and grabbed his jacket, and briefcase from the back seat. "Sell it," he said flatly. "I'll buy you a new one." "Excuse me?" My bewildered eyes glared at him as he piled out the car and shut the door. He can't be serious. I sat there in silence for a short moment, trying to absorb his words. Eventually, I climbed out and watched his dark silhouette walk up through the front entrance of that mansion, bathing in the subdued light emanating from assorted garden lamps. I quickly glimpsed April, standing in the doorway, throwing her arms up in frustration. Oh shit. I hurriedly followed inside. "Please, April, not now," Marcos pleaded calmly, raising a defending hand in front of his body. "3 times, Marcos," April said crossly. "Why turn it off?" Marcos put his cell phone in his pocket. "I am sick of phone calls," he muttered impatiently. "Even mine?" she cried. "What if there was an emergency?" Marcos glanced at me standing in the front door, and April quickly turned her attention to me. Uh-oh. "Bonnie, you took so long," she glared at me. "It's almost 7. "Hey!" Marcos snapped, grabbing April's wrist and giving her a sharp look. "Relax. I'm home now. You know 101 traffic." Bonnie did as you asked her. Sighing, April nodded. "My apologies, Bonnie," she said, wiping her forehead. We just had dinner ready on the table and that's all." "It's okay, April," I smiled sympathetically. April crossed her arms over her chest and pushed a small smile through her lips. "I need a shower," Marcos grumbled quietly, grabbing his jacket and briefcase and disappeared upstairs. April clutched her chest with her hand. Lady is already losing her damn mind, and it's only my first day on the job. "Can I help with anything?" I asked. "No." April glanced at me with sad eyes. No, thank you, Bonnie." "Do you mind if I go and take a shower and change my clothes?" "Oh, of course you can, dear." April nodded profusely, taking my hand in hers. "Dinner will be about 15 minutes. "Thank you, I won't be long," I smiled. Walking quietly outside the door of the house, I sighed with relief as I glimpsed my quarters in the distance. I crept along the path through the dimly lit gardens, and I became quickly lost within the beauty of the Montecito night, noting the lining of the crescent moon cascading shadows over the Santa Ynez Mountains. I closed my eyes, inhaling that deep, crisp night air, my thoughts immediately taken back to where they started. Marcos. Chapter 13. Walking inside my dark abode, I peered down at my sorry pile of belongings and fished out some comfy taupe sweats with a cream woolen sweater. I walked into the dark bathroom and flicked on the light, the gold basin reflecting within my eyes. Looking down at it, I sighed heavily, awash with thoughts. Bonnie DeHaro, what the hell have you got yourself into? I stepped into the shower, turning on the tap, and watched the steam fog the glass. My contemplative thoughts quickly went nasty. Marcos rubbing down his naked body in the shower. As the hot water hit my skin like needles, the car ride home with Marcos repeated itself over and over in my mind. I lathered the soap in my hands and ran it down my body. Marcos watching me, intimately observing my every move, those muscular quads pulling on the silk fabric of his trousers. I quickly thrust my face into the hot spray, drowning the decadent thoughts. My dark little secret. Nobody has to know. I don't ever remember feeling so strongly for a man. Or maybe it was because I hadn't had sex in almost a year. Pathetic, I know. Whatever it was, Marcos Almeida was making me ridiculous. Without washing my hair, I got out and toweled myself off. I studied my frumpy body in the stark, full-length mirror. Oh, please diet tomorrow. I stared at my exhausted face. So plain. I mean, I wasn't ugly by a long shot, but I looked, well, boring, lackluster, and so did everything else I owned. I could do with an eyebrow wax and some false lashes, and admittedly, I wasn't entirely overweight either, but a size 12 was far too fat for Montecito, and for me. One thing in my favor, however, was my natural double D bust. It never let me down. I nodded to myself in agreement. A work in progress. I stepped into my cozy slippers and crept out the door. I hope they don't mind my relaxed look. I quietly entered the house and saw April and Marcos talking. April, holding her glass of wine, quickly spotted me. "Oh, Bonnie, come in, honey," she grinned, appearing much more at ease. Marcos, also in his relaxed look, wearing a black tee and black sweats, glanced over his shoulder and gave me a smile that would melt the coldest ice. I almost had to wipe my drooling mouth. "Oh, Marcos, please." "Wine, Bunny?" he asked, standing against the kitchen counter. Sure," I replied, walking toward them both. "Same as April?" "Thank you, that'll be great." "This is becoming a bit of a habit." Marcus smirked as I walked past him. Oh, that smell of yours. I'd be damned if anyone noticed my eyes rolling back in hedonistic profligacy. You know how you feel butterflies the first time you see someone you fancy? Well, that was me, except the butterflies never went away anytime I saw Marcos. I seriously needed to get a grip. I was convinced he knew what was up. I cordially smiled at everyone and took my place at the dinner table. "This looks incredible," I gasped, feeling my mouth salivate, glimpsing the sumptuous spread of food. I was starving, truly, but eating in front of Marcos Almeida quickly killed my appetite. I would lose weight in no time. "Oh, finally, Wagyu beef," Henry muttered, unable to peel his eyes away from his iPad. "I've only been asking for it for the last month." "Henry, I'm not going to tell you again. Leave that iPad in your room," Marcus spoke sternly. "No electronics, no phones, nothing at the dinner table." "Ha ha, but I'm almost at level 48. "No buts, Henry," April threatened. "I'll take it away from you if you bring it down here again." Sighing, Henry rolled his eyes and put the iPad on the floor. Kid was rebellious. "Wagyu beef and Asian green salad and assorted slices of sashimi, Bonnie," April said. "I hope you enjoy." "This is exquisite. I appreciate you letting me eat with you tonight." "Oh, you're welcome," she nodded, looking pleased. "Perhaps we're not such a conventional family for the Montecito crowd, but, we do things a little differently here." Marcus came over with that glass of wine. Again, his groin was alongside my face. I could have sworn he was closer to me this time, but I sure as hell wasn't looking to confirm. He put my wine glass down on the table, yet unluckily for me, there was no thumb grazing against my neck this time. So it was a simple coincidence. What a letdown. So, how do you feel after your first day on the job, Bonnie? April asked, while Marcus came and sat beside her. Bonnie is the worst driver ever. Marcus shook his head disdainfully, piling Wagyu beef onto his plate. Oh my God, he did not just say that. Marcus! April gasped scornfully. She glared at me apologetically. Marcus, meanwhile, was having a hard time keeping a straight face, and finally burst out laughing with Henry. I'm sorry, Bonnie, he chuckled, his glassy charcoal eyes glistening at me. Really, I'm just teasing. He turned to April. She was so nervous in the car, but she was great. We all erupted into laughter. Could this man be any more adorable? I told her I'd buy her a new car, Marcus said, bringing his wine to his lips. She's asking for an accident in that car of hers. Oh God. I squirmed in my seat. April agreed, nodding her head slowly. That's a nice idea, honey, she said approvingly. She sensed my awkwardness. Bonnie, we would be happy to do this for you, she explained. If all our cars are out of the house and you need to use yours to pick up Henry, I wouldn't dream of him being in your car. This is really very generous of you, I said, feeling overwhelmed. We paid off Louise's house mortgage for her, Marcus answered like it wasn't a big deal. How can people like this still exist on the planet? Tomorrow I'll take you and show you where Lazy Acres is, April said, and then we'll go to the dealer. I couldn't speak. Everyone glanced at me, waiting to say something. I don't know what to say, I stammered, feeling a choking lump form in my throat. No one has ever done anything like this for me before. Don't cry, Bonnie. Bonnie, don't. Don't! Oh, Bonnie, honey, April smiled compassionately. Do you need a tissue? No. Thank you, I'm fine, I sniffled, taking a deep breath. It's just that such generosity rarely exists these days. I mean, I struggle to even get gas money from my old employer to take her kids to and from school. Marcus's eyes were fixated on my face. He sat there, deeply observant, holding his fork in his hand. I let him look. He was fascinated. He finally reached for his wine glass. I grew up in poverty, he revealed quietly. Colombia is not a place for kids, as I'm sure you know. He sighed deeply, remembering. But one day a man came through my village and he gave me a chance. Brought me to the United States when I was 14, Henry's age, and paid for my education, my degree, even bought me an apartment and a car. I could see Marcus becoming affected by his memories. It was the first time this man allowed me to see slight vulnerability. He continued. I vowed that if I ever made anything of myself, that I would help others the way that he helped me. The more I learned about Marcus Almeida, the more I knew. I was quickly falling in love with him. Fast. A self-made man who still managed to maintain a rigorous, empathetic conscience? How? Something changed within me in that split second. I glanced at Marcus without awkwardness and without looking like a retard. And this time, I couldn't contain it, and I did not want to. It was a good thing April and Henry were busy working on their plates of food, because Marcus caught my longer than usual glance, and crazily, those haunting dark eyes stayed locked onto mine. what was happening between us. I felt my heart get hit with a painful wave of intense emotion. Holy shit. "Mom, I'm done," Henry moaned, pushing his plate aside, snapping me out of my optical gridlock with Marcos. "Take it to the sink," April said firmly, watching Henry slouch away from the table. "Don't be lazy, Henry." Grudgingly, Henry took his plate to the sink and disappeared with his beloved iPad upstairs. "Excuse me, ladies," Marcus said as he too got up and took his plate to the sink. Meanwhile, April and I exchanged a warm smile. If only you caught those last few seconds, lady. And that was the last I saw of Marcos that night. I went to bed in a daze. Lying there in the dark, I glanced up at the rosette ceiling, listening to the crazy thoughts swarming through my exhausted mind. The Almeidas were not only one of the most affluent families in America, but seemingly also one of the most generous. My perspective regarding the rich and famous was that they really only cared about themselves. But then, to be fair, I had also met a lot of unwealthy folks in my time, and they too only cared about themselves. Massey, for one, was a fine example. Or maybe it's because Marcos Almeida knows what it's like to have nothing. A humiliate feeling that remained at his side like a pestering shadow throughout his life. Whatever it was, Marcos Almeida was highly enigmatic, which of course I found utterly irresistible. This man was full of mystery, and I was dying to explore it.